Intelligent design has been a big part of philosophy and now is also making inroads into the scientific domain. Intelligent design is the study of the natural world based on intending to demonstrate that living things and organisms were created in more or less in their present forms by an intelligent designer. Intelligent design was formulated in the 1990s, primarily in the United States, as an explicit refutation of the theory of biological evolution advanced by Charles Darwin. Today, to discuss this topic, we have with us today a European scientist who's also a strong advocate of the theory of intelligent design. But before we get to our show, I'd like to ask all our viewers to subscribe to our channel down below for various interviews on various topics, because this is Zain Khan and we're live. Welcome to Zain Khan Live, where everything is discussed and nothing is censored. Today, the topic of our show is intelligent design, and our guest today is Dr. Gunter Bechly, who is a prominent European scientist, paleontologist, and also an intelligent design advocate. Welcome to our show, Dr. Gunter. This is Zain Khan. It is a pleasure having you.
Hello, nice to be here.
Dr. Bechley, before we get to intelligent design itself, the topic, I was reading about you and found out that you were a staunch supporter of the theory of evolution. What brought you closer to the theory of intelligent design? What's your story?
Now, the story is I was working as a scientific curator at a large natural history museum in Germany. And I was in charge of organizing the largest public event in Germany for the Darwin Year celebrations in 2009. It was a special exhibition, and for this exhibition I designed an exhibit to dramatize the debate between Darwinism and intelligent design. And the exhibit was a large wooden beam balance, and on one side of the balance we had all the books of Darwin critics, of intelligent design proponents and creationists, and on the other side of the balance just two books by Charles Darwin. And the balance went down on the side of the two books because there are the heavy arguments, and it went up on the side with the many books because they are the lightweighted arguments, as I suppose and wanted to convey in this exhibit. And actually I read the books on this side of the balance, and I found many arguments that were much more sophisticated than I expected. And these arguments made me from a Darwin supporter and a staunch Darwinist to a Darwin critic. And these arguments, there were several arguments like the search space problem for new proteins, so that you have such a vast combinatorial space of different amino acids and so isolated islands of function in this combinatorial space that you cannot find, that you cannot get from one island of function to another island of function by a gradual process. So basically Darwinian evolution of new proteins is impossible. And another argument that convinced me is the so-called waiting time problem, on which I'm now also working myself. It's in simple words the fact that the windows of time that are established by the fossil record turned out to be much too short, orders of magnitudes too short, to accommodate the necessary genetic changes that you can calculate based on the standard mathematical apparatus of population genetics. And of course, there's also an information problem that convinced me, because to get this whole Darwinian process started, you need a replicator to have a process of replication and then these copy errors. And the first replicator turns out to be so complex, and you cannot explain it with the Darwinian process, that you need a kind of miracle-like event to get the Darwinian process going in the first place. And then, of course, the question is, why not invoking this kind of explanations further in the history of life? And you have also this kind of design signature in the genetic code with software-like principles like data compression or error correction. And that got me questioning Darwinism. And finally, also, if I look at my own field of expertise, the fossil record and paleontology, I discovered too many instances of discontinuities, of discontinuous transitions that conflict with the gradualistic predictions of Darwin's theory. So that's basically my story, how I came to doubt Darwinism.
Dr. Bechley, what I've gathered by your story is that you seem to be a critic of Darwin. Which major points would you disagree with Darwin and his theory of evolution?
I think the most fundamental point where I disagree with the theory of evolution, especially Neo-Darwinian theory of evolution, is that this Neo-Darwinian process can sufficiently explain the origin of biological novelty and complexity. Of course, this process is not totally without explanatory power, so there are certain phenomena that it can explain well, like, for example, the origin of drug resistance in microbes. We can observe this in the laboratory and in field experiments. And it may also explain how we got, let's say, different species of finches from an original founder population on the Galapagos Islands. But it doesn't explain how you got birds with feathers from reptile-like ancestors with scales in the first place. So the Darwinian process cannot explain what people call macroevolution. It can explain microevolution. And I also disagree that Darwinism can longer be considered as a good explanation because there are certain claims by Darwinism that turned out to be mathematically impossible, like, for example, in the case of this waiting time problem, given the probabilistic resources that are available in our universe. And it also makes certain predictions that have been refuted by empirical evidence, as, for example, the gradualistic predictions refuted by the non-gradual transitions and appearances in the fossil record. So that's my main point of disagreement. Minor points would be the issue of let's say, common ancestry. Common ancestry is well compatible with intelligent design, so you could have a kind of intelligently guided evolution using common ancestry, basically using biological material and a kind of genetic engineering. That is a minor issue that has nothing to do with the question, can the history of life fully be explained by unguided processes, or does it require a kind of intelligent intervention?
Dr. Bechley, how do you define intelligent design, and how is it different from the current prevailing worldview in science biology?
Okay, maybe we first should define what is the current prevailing worldview in biology. And the current worldview in biology is, of course, based on naturalism and materialism. So it's claiming that all of life is a kind of fluke that came about by a mindless, undirected process of chance, that would be random mutation, and necessity, that would be mainly selection, and maybe complemented by other undirected processes like genetic drift and hybridization and phenotypic plasticity, etc. But basically it would be a unguided mechanistic process as explanation of life and its history and its complexity and diversity. And on the other hand, intelligent design can be defined as intelligent design is a scientific theory and also a scientific method to identify evidence in nature that is best explained by an intelligent cause rather than by an unguided, undirected process. And that is what the theory and the method can do. The question, who is the designer? Is the intelligent cause God, or is it aliens, or are we living in the matrix? That is transcending the method, so that must be answered by arguments based on philosophy or metaphysics or theology. Intelligent design theory is an empirical method that can only detect evidence for design but not identify the designer or say something about the motivation of the designer or what mechanism he used. You could compare it like if we discover, let's say, on Mars, on another planet, constructions and technology, and we could detect that it's design stuff, that it's a kind of machinery and a kind of culture of aliens, but we couldn't say anything. Where did the aliens come from? How did they originate? Why did they build this? How did they build it? But still we could detect this evidence for design. And this method of intelligent design is used in a lot of different disciplines. It's used in SETI project to detect alien civilizations. It's used in forensics to find out did somebody die of natural causes, or was it a crime? Was a person murdered? Or it's used in archaeology. If you find certain, let's say, scratches in a cave, it's the question, is it some kind of, or did it originate because a cave bear did sharpen its claws at the wall of the cave, or did some cavemen develop the first counting system? So the same methods are used in a lot of disciplines. And intelligent design theory applies the same methodology that is unquestioned and questioned in all those other disciplines, also for biology, to detect evidence of design in the realm of the biological world.
Let's get to a very important question. When we study nature through the lens of intelligent design, is there a tectonic shift as to how we view the world through a microscope and beyond, in your opinion?
That's actually an interesting question. And as I understand the question, I think there are two levels how you could address it and understand and answer it. One level would be the question, how do we interpret and make sense of all the results of natural science in terms of a coherent worldview? And here, of course, intelligent design is a tectonic shift away from the currently still ruling paradigm of naturalism and materialism. But beyond that, that is more or less a kind of philosophical question. But in terms of, does intelligent design influence the actual way how we do science and how science operates and how scientists work, then it also makes a very big difference, because scientists tend to find what they are looking for, and depending on your initial paradigm, you ask different questions, you do different experiments, and so your approach changes the way how you view nature and what questions you ask. And one example is intelligent design predicted that non-coding DNA would turn out to have function after all. And Darwinists said, well, non-coding DNA will turn out to be junk, so-called junk DNA, just evolutionary leftover that is without function. And in the last years we have found out the prediction by intelligent design was right. These non-coding sequences, which is the majority of DNA, all do have a function. They work like a kind of operating system. And the coding parts of DNA code for proteins, and the other part turn genes on and off, and do a lot of other kind of things that are fundamental for the working of genetics and of DNA. So that was a typical design prediction that is based on the intelligent design approach. The same will be true, let's say, for a question of atavistic organs. Will they have function, or will they be functionless? If you look for design patterns in nature and for design principles, then you will discover stuff that Darwinists will maybe overlook or even deliberately ignore because it doesn't fit in their worldview.
Dr. Bechley, let's get to the last question. You being a scientist, and seeing things like artificial intelligence coming up, how do you see the future of intelligent design? Is intelligent design the future?
Yeah, so still I would like first to emphasize that the important thing is intelligent design true? Is it the correct approach? Not if it will win or prevail in mainstream academia in the short term. But since I'm convinced that intelligent design theory is correct, and I'm also convinced that truth will prevail in the end, then therefore I think that the future of at least historical biology and cosmology will be intelligent design, but this requires a kind of paradigm shift first, and such paradigm shifts don't happen overnight. They need certain time to unfold, and usually it goes like this. First, certain anomalies and problems accumulate. They turn out to be hard to resolve or unresolvable. Then scientists develop several epicycles of ad hoc explanations to get rid of the conflicting evidence and to save, let's say, the paradigm of unguided mechanistic evolution. And if these approaches all fail, then finally it will be needed that science generally becomes more open to mind-based explanations. And this shift could come from other disciplines like cosmology and quantum mechanics, where physicists are much more open to this kind of stuff because of phenomena like the fine-tuning of the universe and the origin of space and time and these weird phenomena in the quantum realm. And so when the time is ripe, I think the paradigm shift will happen, and materialism is ultimately doomed as a worldview because it's unable to explain the world that we experience and is even incoherent. So I think intelligent design is the future, but not in the short term. It will take time to unfold. But we already observe, even in mainstream evolutionary biology, that the problems accumulate and that those few theorists who really work on the underpinnings of the theory, that they realize that Neo-Darwinism is unable to explain the biological origins and complexity. So, for example, I attended a conference of the Royal Society in London in 2016, and there was a talk by a world-famous evolutionary biologist, Gerd Müller, and in his talk he had a slide where he showed explanatory deficits of Neo-Darwinism, and among these explanatory deficits, what the theory cannot explain, he listed origin of phenotypic novelty, new biological features, origin of phenotypic complexity, so new complex organs, and non-gradual transitions in the fossil record. And that's basically all the interesting stuff. If Neo-Darwinism cannot explain that, then it fails as explanation for macroevolution. And now we are in the phase where evolutionists try to find other alternatives to Neo-Darwinism, and they look for these stuff like epigenetics and phenotypic plasticity and niche construction and so on. And the prediction by intelligent design theorists is that all these other approaches will fail as well, and then we will enter an interesting phase in the debate where people, even in mainstream academia, will become more and more open to design explanations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gunter Bechly, for being on Zain Khan Live. It was a pleasure having you and discussing intelligent design.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
This was Dr. Gunter Bechly. We were discussing the topic of the theory of intelligent design. But before we get to the end of our show, I'd like to ask all our viewers to subscribe to our channel down below for more interviews on various topics. Because this is Zain Khan, and we're live.